Tim, what's up, man? Great to see you again. I was looking at it. It's been like 5 or 6 years now since we talked last.
I know, I can't believe it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. I think I said this the last time we talked. I'm still just dumbfounded that sex trafficking, especially for children, is such a huge issue. I cannot believe it's so prevalent today in, 2023. It just seems wild to me.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's growing even more so right now. It's still the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. I mean, last I looked, it's now rivaling the drug trade. It's because what these traffickers are finding is, look, I can sell a bag of cocaine once. I can sell a child 10 to 20 times over a 24-hour period. So it's extremely lucrative. And so long as the United States, we are the number one demand, and so long as we continue sexualizing the world, pornifying the world, sexualizing children, well, that demand just going to keep increasing, and the traffickers are going to continue to do their dirty work on kids. So,
So you said that the United States is the number one consumer. Am I understanding you correctly?
yeah, the United States almost every year is the number one or two consumer of child exploitation material.
Oh,
And also over the last 2 or 3 years, State Department has even admitted that the United States is in the top three countries for destination countries for human trafficking, which makes sense. I mean, it's just economics. You got the demand is here. The pedophiles are congregated here, and so traffickers will get kids to them. Which, you look at the southern border, right? 85,000 unaccompanied minors, thousands under 5 years old, show up at the port of entry, and they're released into the United States with no background checks. Well, there you go. You know what's happening here. This is so easy. Kids are being exploited. They enter the U.S. nameless, identityless, and they're going to be victims their entire life. Thanks to this horrific policy on the border.
I'm glad you said that because that is one of the questions. I think there tends to be a bleeding heart for opening up the borders, and I think there's a lot of people who actually believe that's helpful. I don't think there any sort of ill intent with some of those thoughts, but what often gets overlooked is the natural consequence of having open border policies.
Yeah, you're exactly right. People think I'm being kind, I'm letting people in. No, you're not. You just don't understand this. The only compassionate policy, especially if you care about women and children who are being abused, is to enforce the border. And the reason is that human traffickers are making about, according to one report, $14 million a day. And I was 10 years as a special agent undercover operator on the southern border, and it was not a partisan issue. It wasn't controversial. The more of the wall we built, the more enforcement we did, the more kids we rescued, because it's the last chance. Kids are being funneled into the U.S. It's the last chance to catch them, to catch the bad guys and rescue the kids. You want those kids being funneled through a port of entry where experts with guns and who are the good guys are taking them out. So open borders facilitate, once you understand the economics of pedophilia, they're facilitating the trafficking of children. Believe me, if you talk to any of those kids who are being abused right now in New York City or LA, they're going to say this: wish to God there had been a wall when I got brought in, that I had my last chance to scream out to a Customs and Border Protection official and have my life rescued. I've been in the port of entry. I've seen it. I've seen the rescues happen there. I've been part of them. And so it's devastating what's happened, and we need to change the argument by telling the truth. The only compassionate policy is border enforcement.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I can see why that's the case. If it wasn't happening here, though, and I'm just trying to look at it from all angles. Obviously, we want to police ourselves. We want to police this country. We want to, take care of what's going on within our own neighborhoods and backyards. If it wasn't happening here, it seems like it would happen somewhere else. That's not an excuse not to deal with it here, but it would just happen in other places.
That's right. And that's why, at our foundation, I mean, we're worldwide. We're currently, we've worked in 30 countries. We're in all states in the US, and we need to grow it to be in every state, because our job is to consult, empower, train, and work with law enforcement and aftercare services throughout the world to make sure they're doing everything they can to rescue the children in their regions.
I'm assuming most of them are underage girls, I imagine is the case
Yes.
largely. Uh, where are these girls coming from? Are these girls that are being taken? Are these girls that are, in some sort of foster or orphan care? I don't really know where it starts, I guess I would say.
Well, it's a great question. And the answer is human trafficking has different faces in different places. So like in the US system, you're going to see a lot of foster kids who don't have a lot of supervision in their lives. They end up getting, they're like sitting ducks often for traffickers to kind of find their vulnerabilities, exploit them, and bring them in, thinking they're going to be taken care of. If you look at the kids coming in from the southern border and coming into the U.S., these are largely kids who've been kidnapped in Central America. That it's pretty easy to do that in some countries, little recourse. Law enforcement's not where it needs to be. So they take these kids, and how, thanks to our policies are incentivizing. Our policies are the wind at the back of these traffickers, because what they do is they know our policies, and they know that if they just put a safety pin in a little note that says sponsor is, George Smith, here's his phone number, New York City. The Customs and Border officials and the Health and Human Services, they, by policy, have to call that number and use our tax dollars to send that kid to George Smith with no background check, no DNA analysis. Off they go. So in the case of the southern border, that's what's happening there. If you look at our offices in Asia, they go to impoverished communities and promise them this, that, and the other thing, and a job, and come on down to the city, and then boom, those kids disappear. And mom and dad have no idea where to go. Again, no recourse, because who's going to listen to an impoverished villager who says my child's been taken? Well, you let your child go. It's usually a lure. It's not often the hard, cold kidnapping in the white van coming in. That's not generally how it happens. Like the vast majority of cases are deception, the lure. That's how they get them.
I'm sure there's a lot of grooming that takes place as well. Maybe it's somebody that that gradually introduces you to this world or this environment or behavior, and then before you know it, you're down this rabbit hole and never to see your son or daughter again. I mean, geez.
Exactly right. In fact, the movie Sound of Freedom that's coming out is based on a true story where that's exactly what they used. Miss Cartagena, Kelly Juarez in the film, real person who was arrested, and actually I just testified in her trial just a few months ago, because I was the undercover operator leading on that op. But she was a person who was famous in the community. She was Miss Cartagena. She's in music videos, and she had a modeling school, and she'd give scholarships. In fact, she won Miss Cartagena on the platform that she was going to help impoverished kids of Colombia in the Cartagena region, and she was giving scholarships to these kids. Well, these kids would come and they want to be rich and famous like her. Well, she eventually desensitizes them with, what do they do? They use drugs, pornography, and pretty soon say, look, part of this deal is that you have sex with these Americans who come down. That's part of being famous. And boom, these kids are gone. They're gone. And so, yeah, that's sometimes, like you said, it's a slow lure. And this happens online in the US, right? These guys go online, find our kids, pretend to be the same age. It's really some 50-year-old pedophile, but pretending to be a 13-year-old, the star quarterback in the next county over, talking to this girl and slowly luring them, slowly getting them to trust them. And then they show up at a mall and boom, they're gone.
Is this more prevalent? We hear stories about, Hollywood and elites, and obviously there's, Epstein and these other actors. Is this more prevalent in the Hollywood and elite circle because of their access to wealth and people not saying no, and the boundaries are tested and often not even there at all? Like, do you see that?
Yeah, so I'll say this: it's one of the most frustrating things in operations and investigating these crimes, because there really is no easy profile. We've arrested, clergymen. We've arrested law enforcement officers, right? That's just in my cases. I've included those, and educators, and so it's very difficult, because it really is something that is, if someone's a sex addict and they start wanting that because they have a porn addiction that turns into a child porn addiction, so it really hits every part. But to your point, if you're wealthy, if you have means, you have power, you're going to see something like Harvey Weinstein or Jeffrey Epstein, and so absolutely, people with power and money, if they also have that sex addiction, they're going to have a much easier time luring in and abusing women and children.
I was talking with a friend the other day, and they were talking a little bit about what we're addressing now. And I'm in St. George, which is southern Utah. A lot of people are familiar with it. And she was telling me how prevalent it is here. I mean, St. George is a pretty spiritual, religious community. It's a pretty small community, although it's growing. But she was saying, because of how close we are to the I-15 and how quickly it is to move north and south and wherever you want, a lot of people are coming here, and a lot of it is originating here in southern Utah, of all places.
Well, this is true. You know, I worked on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force of the Attorney General's Office of Utah back when I was an agent, and I can tell you it's very active. A lot of kids in Utah, a lot of vulnerability. The I-15 being a corridor for trafficking. I can tell you this: the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, they're going out every week, multiple times a week, sometimes doing hits, doing busts on child sex crimes. And I'll say this: one of the finest law enforcement institutions that I know of is St. George Police Department. We work pretty close with them. Some of their guys work as undercover operators for us. So you guys are in good hands down there.
That's good. That's good. So do you still go on operations yourself? I know you have a large team. You've got a lot of volunteers. We have some mutual friends. I won't say names because I want to respect that privacy if it's important to them. But we have some mutual friends who have been on missions and done some actual rescuing and groundwork. Is this something that you still do personally?
You know, occasionally, as the years go on, I do less and less. We have 6 regions throughout the world, including the United States, and they have their own teams. I do have a team that I maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Like last year, I led a huge operation that's going to be coming out in a docu-series soon called The Hidden War. It's a crazy operation I led where we were helping kids in Ukraine get out of the war zone and end up finding a human trafficking ring that led us through Mexico and Ecuador. So I'll occasionally get involved, but I'll tell you, as Sound of Freedom's coming out and we have other documentaries, my undercover days are probably coming to a screeching halt here. So
yeah, I didn't think about that, but your name is gonna, or your face is gonna be more and more recognizable. Plus, I wonder about operations, especially in I would say South America. You know, you're a white guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, fair skin, just like me. It's like, is that an issue, or are these the guys who are actually coming down and soliciting these services?
Yeah,
services is not the right word, but
yeah. So one of the sad commentary for Western nations is we are what the traffickers are looking to service. You know, that demand doesn't just wait for kids to come into the U.S. We go out. You know, the United States has some of the best anti sex tourism laws where we can actually hold Americans accountable. If they have sex with a child overseas, they can hold them accountable as if they committed that act in the U.S. So, which speaks to the problem that it is. So, yeah, Western undercover operators tend to infiltrate a lot quicker, only because we are what the traffickers are. We look like the demand. You know, we look like those who are kids in their countries. And so, you know, but I will say this: when I do undercover work, even the last year or two, I have undercover disguises. We have a Hollywood makeup artist that, you know, it'd be hard to recognize me with the different, you know, I can show you some pictures offline, but even that's getting a little scary for me just because my voice, and there's only so many disguises that I could come up with right before it's time to hang it up. So
have you been in situations personally where somebody has either recognized you or, you know, grown suspicious to the point where, hey, like we're in a serious situation right now?
Nope. Never happened. Never happened yet. We've been super careful and haven't seen that yet, but I don't want to see it. So that's why I'm going to start making some changes.
Well, I mean, it puts everybody at risk, right? It puts you at risk, your team at risk, the girls, the children, whoever it is, it puts everybody at risk. Yeah. You said something about pornography. Do you see that as a reoccurring trend with getting into the world, not just from a victim standpoint, but from these men who, and possibly women as well, who perpetuate this problem and these crimes? Is pornography a gateway into it, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say absolutely it is. It's not popular to say this, but the truth is, you know, sex addiction is what creates the demand. People want sex. Now, pornography has been shown. There's an amazing organization, actually Utah-based, called Fight the New Drug, and they approach this from a scientific position. What happens to the brain? What's the chemical reaction going on when you look at porn? Well, the chemical reaction is very similar to marijuana or drugs. It's not the drug or the naked pictures. It's the dopamine hit. It's the endorphin hit, and that becomes addictive. People want that and they need it. But just like marijuana, you know, you can only take so much before you become a little bit immune. The chemical reaction is dying down, so you got to jump into meth or something, you know, stronger. Well, the same can be said about porn. Adult pornography, the legal porn, you know, is kind of like marijuana, where it's like, hey, it's working for a while. Well, now it's not working. So I need to jumpstart my system. I need something to shock the system, and boom, they start getting into children. or animals or some other crazy fetish. And again, it's about the dopamine. It's about it's about the chemical reaction they want, and thus we have the reason that justifies a number that's 2 million children currently in the commercial sex trade. I mean, there has to be that kind of demand, and the reason for the demand is that it's sex addiction that often is born of pornography.
Yeah, and it's, I'm always interested in, or fascinated. I don't know what the right word is, but you have this concept of feminism where these women will talk about women's empowerment, women's rights, and they talk a lot about, and I think this is even more prevalent than it's ever been, is this concept of quote unquote sex work as being good work or righteous work. I don't think it is, but that's what they say. A woman should be able to choose. And what they fail to realize is that it's the objectification of women. It's not liberating. It's captivating. It's something that's taking away freedom and opportunity and choices from women. And I'm just wondering why that's getting so misconstrued and why people can't seem to think or acknowledge that it leads to some of these really dangerous and destructive paths.
Well, that's one of the messages I want out there. You know, Amnesty International came out a few years ago in favor of liberating sex workers. And I'm very libertarian, very constitutionalist. And I would think people should be free to do what they want so long as they're not hurting other people and especially children. But what happens, to your point, what happens when you legalize the whole thing? Now you've made legitimate human traffickers, because now they can pose as pimps, because that's what they're pushing for, not just legalizing sex, but actually legalizing the pimps. That's Amnesty International, and even New York State, Oregon State, they're pushing for the same. Pimps should be businessmen. Well, that's horrifying, because those pimps, if they can sell a child for 3 times what they sell an adult for, now you've just shaken hands with them. They're paying taxes. They have a little certification on their office window, but they're never going to show the compliance officers the 12 kids they have in the stable back in the backyard, but those kids now have a market to play in, a market to be abused in. That said, I'm against legalizing the work of a pimp or a predatory, client. But I would never criminalize anything with the sex worker or prostitute. And luckily, we're seeing a change in that. That should not be criminalized, in my opinion. You don't know their story. To your point, this is not something, you might find a handful that say, I want to do this. In my experience, none of them want to do this. Very few of them want to do this. And so to criminalize them is shameful, because you don't know their past. They might have been trafficked since they were 10 years old. But it's a bad idea to create sex markets in the adult entertainment industry, because it only creates the submarket where children will be bought and sold.
I hear what you're saying with regards to the pimps. I do question the idea of not criminalizing sex work itself for these women, because they may have a past. I don't know that the past excuses current behavior that is not conducive to a healthy society. I'm trying to think of another example, but any crime really that you can think of, the past or his story doesn't excuse those things, if that makes sense.
Well, I come at it from maybe a little different position, where again, I'm very constitutionalist, very libertarian, and I believe it's morally appalling, but I don't think it's the government's business to, if an adult wants to pay for sex, and this might sound outrageous to people, but I'm against it. But if an adult
morally you're against it, sure,
do something, like, I don't feel it's the government's job to intervene there, unless a third party is being victimized directly by this work, and that's where I find children are being victimized, because if you legalize that transaction, then the byproduct is you're going to have more transactions of children being hurt. And so I just don't see, if a woman's selling herself, I think it's horrifying. I think she needs help. I'd like to provide resources to help her. I don't think sending her to jail, I don't know who she hurt but herself. And so I don't think sending her to jail is the business of the government. But that's the right.
No, it's interesting. And I think what you're referring to is unintended incentives, like you were talking about earlier, is I think most of the laws that we enact, or most of the rules and regulations, I would say most of them are incorporated because whoever, championed this law or this regulation did so because they believed it was the right thing to do.
Sure.
But there are so many unintended incentives and consequences that happen even if our intentions are pure and right.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
What kind of backlash do you personally receive as you go after companies or organizations like Amnesty International? And I'm sure there's a whole laundry list of organizations that are on your list, and I'm sure you're on their list. What type of backlash do you receive with these organizations?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, I never thought that the pursuit of liberating children and rescuing them would be something that becomes political or becomes reason to hate on groups like ours who are doing that work. But unfortunately, it is like it's the biggest difficulties we have isn't finding traffickers and children. Um, we know what we're doing, so it's relatively easy for us to find that. The harder battle for me is fighting what the good guys, okay, the media that wants to, they want to make the world believe that human trafficking isn't real because somehow it gets in the way of their agenda to, for example, make the word pedophile into minor attracted persons. They want to almost normalize and desensitize the world, saying it's okay. And in fact, it may even be healthy for a child to have orgasm by adults. I mean, this is getting into mainstream culture in ways I can't even comprehend. I mean, I've been tracking pedophile groups who've been making these arguments for quite some time. Sexualize kids, take God out of education, it gets in the way. Get parents out of the way. You know, public officials know best. Teach kids about masturbation and show them naked pictures, and all this is what the pedophiles have been pushing for decades because it makes them prey. Now we see half the country actually formulating policies and doing exactly what the pedophiles been asking them to do, and we're watching it happen before our eyes. I see what kids are being given, the material under. I used to be able to arrest people for providing the kind of material that is given to children by public school officials. It's
Right.
the damnedest thing I've ever seen. Or empowering children to make choices that affect themselves completely. You know, to say a child can consent to just doing things to their body that, you know, a child can't consent to that. And this has nothing to do with the trans issue. Adults should do what they want. I support adults if they want to be trans or whatever they want to do. But if you say a 13-year-old can consent to cutting off their genitalia, I'm telling you what's going to happen next, and is happening. You can't stop that child from also saying that I want to consent to sex with a 50-year-old, or I want to identify as a 30-year-old. You can't. The minute you start empowering children this way, you are victimizing them. And so the pedophiles are sitting back salivating at these policies. And so the biggest fights we have now is in the cultural wars and the political wars here in this country. And they want me to be discredited. So they'll attack me simply because I say, no, we're not going to change the name pedophile to minor attracted persons. Well, Tim, pedophile is so degrading. Yes, it is. And
It's
that's
supposed to be.
as it should be, because it's the red flag. Don't normalize this. So those are the bigger battles, the more difficult battles, believe it or not, than actually rescuing kids from human traffickers.
Do you think though that the majority of let's say a school teacher, I mean, we've all heard stories, see things in the news. Do you think that these people are evil? And there is evil. I'm not going to dismiss that. There's evil people in the world, and you're more intimately familiar with that than probably most people walking around on the planet. Or are they just delusional? Are they ignorant to the message that they're sharing and how it's actually championing the cause of some of the things, disgusting, despicable things we're talking about right now?
I think by and large, it's delusion, it's ignorance, it's trying to be tolerant. You know, there's this weird culture going on that if you let your kid do this to themselves, or if you accept, you know, that call them minor attracted persons, somehow you're going to get more social media hits and views. And it's true, it's happening. So it's this weird kind of, in the name of tolerance, I'm going to do something that feels right because people are telling me it should feel right. But if you look in the weeds on it and get into the dirt into it, you're going to see you're hurting kids. And so part of this is just educating people, waking them up to making them real. Look, I'm not saying that this kind of godless side that is sexualizing our kids and doing what the pedophiles want. I'm not saying they're talking at all. They're not. I think they hate pedophiles. They just don't realize that they're peddling the same ideologies. And that's what we need to wake them up to.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that assessment because I think there's a lot of things that go around with regards to just saying, oh, these people are evil. I'm like, oh, well, hold on. Like, let's really I'm not opposed to thinking that, but let's really figure out what it is, because if it's evil, that's one way we need to address it. If it's delusion and ignorance, that's another way. And so we ought to really call it for what it is. I would think. What
I agree.
you said something about it's easy to find these individuals. I'm really curious about how that works. I'm sure at this point you have a pretty expansive network and informants and undercover operators that probably give you a lot of leads into these things. But how are you finding these individuals, and then what does the process look like from there? Because you can't do everything, so you have to be selective on what you're going after.
Correct. So, first and foremost, we make the relationship with law enforcement. We need that power, that authority to actually make the arrests and do the extractions in a legal format. And so once we have those pieces in place, then we work together how to infiltrate. Oftentimes it starts online. There's tools, there's technology, there's even AI tools now that I can't get into the details, obviously, because we don't want to expose our tactics that they're countermeasures for. But there's ways to go in, including into the dark net, and pretty easily identify people who are making transactions in the world of child sex. And then, it's still very effective, just the cold, hard, undercover work, informants going into bars, clubs, strip clubs, spas, and so forth. We get intel. Again, a lot of intel originates on the dark net where it says, hey, go to this spa, ask for this kind of massage, and a 12-year-old is going to come out. We'll send our undercover operator in there, and 9 times out of 10, it's exactly what happens. And then, but once we get that intel, we immediately turn it over. We always are working under the jurisdiction of whatever authority that we're in, so they can actually do something about it. So, and we turn these real operations into really trainings to where we can start leaving, and the government we're working for can continue doing these types of operations on their own.
Do you have some of these authorities that ever resist your efforts and your desire to serve and support what they're doing, or is everybody in all the departments fairly receptive and open to what you guys are doing at this point?
At this point, they're pretty receptive. It was hard in the beginning when we started in 2013, 14, because human trafficking wasn't as known. Sometimes we're educating law enforcement, especially in developing countries, on what it even is, and they don't even know or believe it's even happening. But because there's been a more heightened awareness in the media, people they're more available to the thought and open to working with us. And so it's rare that we have a problem, even with corruption, because we work closely usually with U.S. Embassy assets, Homeland Security investigations, where I came from, and a lot of our operators came from. We work very closely with them when we can, and they help us vet out and find the right authorities in these countries that are trustworthy. There's been times we have a documentary coming out called Operation Praying Sage. It's named after Sage Robbins, the life of Tony Robbins, because she helped us with this operation in a really unique way. But it's a story of a rescue operation we were conducting in Haiti of 10 girls who had been lured in there and being trafficked. And the Haitians turned on us. The cops turned on us in the middle of the operation and got paid off by the traffickers. And yet we still managed to get the girls out into safety and rescue them. But we filmed the whole thing. And so, I mean, there's times when they turn on us. We have contingency plans in place in case that were to happen.
What would cause you to not pursue a lead or something along those lines, where you're thinking, we can't pursue that, we can't dedicate resources to this, or maybe it's the intel's not where we need it to be? What would cause that?
I mean, the only thing I think that would cause that is if we believe the child wasn't there anymore.
Got it.
Our promise to the public, we say it and we believe it and we mean it, that we will go anywhere. We will go to any, and the Haiti operation proves it. People say all the time, don't work in Haiti, they could turn on you. Okay, well, so that girl doesn't deserve to have any hope? No, if we have the intel and it's solid, we're going to go and we'll figure it out. We will have contingencies A through C, and we will pray our guts out and expect miracles to happen if everything falls through, because God's children are not for sale, as Jim Caviezel so powerfully says in the movie Sound of Freedom. And so we will pursue it. We'll pursue it unless we believe that the kid's no longer there. If the kid's there, we'll find a way.
I'm glad also that you're talking about AI, because every once in a while I have some bot or whatever, try to clone my Instagram account, and I get people who message me, and I'm grateful they do, but they'll show me occasionally the thread of the conversations, and these bots are getting really, really good. It's very personal. It sounds a lot like me. It's talking about conversations that I would have based on what my business model is. And I imagine that we are just opening an entire can of worms. It used to be that if it was somebody trying to solicit services or trick a young girl or young boy into meeting them somewhere, that it had to be a person, And now that's just leveraged and it's just happening to the nth degree.
That's right. And not only is this going to and is affecting our fight because kids are going to get lured at a much faster rate, but yeah, businesses everywhere, e-businesses everywhere can be under threat. Because I mean, there may come a time when we can't even trust buying anything online because we don't really know definitively who it is.
Yeah.
Scary times.
Tell me about, I know we're a little pressed for time and you've got a busy schedule because of the release and everything that you want to do, but tell me a little bit about the movie that's coming out, Sound of Freedom, and what it's about, and then how we can get involved in various different ways.
So Sound of Freedom is a feature film starring Jim Caviezel, Mira Sorvino, and it tells the story of me and my family and what we were dealing with back in 2013 when we came across an operation in Haiti actually Haiti and Colombia, but this one's focused on Colombia. And we had to make a decision. I was told by the U.S. government I had to come home. I had no jurisdiction or authority to be there, but I had also committed to the point that if I left, the op wouldn't have happened. So it was a tough place to be. And it was the story of how we decided to do something crazy and in faith and just quit our job just so we could do the operation. And it actually led to and turned into the biggest rescue operation that may be recorded in history that we know of. Over 120 girls were rescued. And it's the story of how it all took place. It's kind of an action film, it's really, it's kind of a white knuckle kind of thing. We're looking for these kids and it's going undercover and doing everything and anything we could creatively think up to get these kids rescued.
Yeah. Well, I've watched the trailer. Your team sent over the screener, so I've seen a part of it. I haven't seen the whole thing, but really, really powerful. One thing I have to say as we wind this down is I really appreciate you and your work. I love having conversations like this because so many of us as men recognize problems. It's really easy to recognize problems. We see it, we're familiar with it, but relative to that, few of us take action towards those things, especially when it puts you and your family and your loved ones at personal risk. And I just want to tell you, I commend you for that. And I appreciate you leading from the front in that way. It's such important work. And the fact that you're following through on it means a lot. And it sets a great example.
Well, thank you, because most media outlets in the world don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, I bet.
So the fact that you're even willing to have this conversation and introduce your community to this dark thing, I appreciate it, because this is the solution. Media will be the solution. And we want everybody to buy tickets to Sound of Freedom. Angel Studios, who brought you The Chosen, they are the ones distributing. Amazing group. I'll tell you this, I just got word in that we have our competition is Indiana Jones. They both come out at the same time. We have doubled already ticket sales over Indiana Jones
is that today,
right now. Yeah, so this is good because there's a silent majority that's people of light are saying, no, we want to see this. So we're grateful for that. Go to angel.com. Go to angel.com and buy your tickets. People can also pay it forward. They have a program where it's like, look, everybody, we want 2 million butts in seats on July 4th weekend to represent the 2 million children in the commercial sex trade. And how Angel Studios is doing this is not only can you buy a ticket for your family and yourself, but you can buy 10 tickets or 50 tickets for people who otherwise won't be able to go, and they can distribute those tickets nationwide. And so if people can't afford it, they can still go see the film. Again, July 4th, Sound of Freedom, angel.com.
We'll sync everything up. And then you also, just to put a plug in for Operation Underground Railroad, just tell the guys a little bit briefly about that and where they can go. And that, I think they can help through that as well. Donations. Excellent. Or get involved in other ways.
That'd be great. Yeah. OURrescue.org is the name of the foundation. The other foundation that I run that I equally love is called the Nazarene Fund, founded by Glenn Beck in 2014. And we do similar work, but it's a little more, in some ways, next level, and working on persecuted Christians and helping them get out, and other religious minorities in the Middle East, Africa, organ harvesting cases. So either one of those, OURrescue.org or the NazareneFund.org. So thank you so much.
Tim, we'll sync it all up. I appreciate you. I know you're a busy man. Thanks for carving out some time, and we'll get this all loaded for the guys, and they can know where to go.
Thank you. Appreciate you.